Hey guys, Jay here and welcome to another cosplay tutorial. So this month is going to be something special, just like last month where I did two things from the same thing. This month I'm also doing two things from one series. And those are the Hylian Shield and Master Sword from The Legend of Zelda. So specifically, these ones are from my favorite Zelda game, which is A Link Between Worlds for the 3DS. So that's why the sword is as big as it is, but I'll get to that in the sword tutorial. But today's video is specifically how to make the Hylian Shield. When the Master Sword tutorial goes up, I'll have it linked in the description as well as the card up in the top corner. And if you want to make this for yourself, there'll be a template which you can get to down in the description. Anyway, let's get started. I start by tracing out the template onto 10mm foam. I make two for each side. The shield will be 2 layers thick. This makes it easy to pull into the right shape. The vertical center is curved on the pattern, which pulls the shield into the right curves on the top and the bottom, but you can't do that for the two sides, so I make up for that by using 2 layers. But first I use contact cement to glue the center line together, and for everywhere that I use contact cement I use 2 coats because the cement soaks into the foam on the first layer and doesn't stick together very well. So once the center was glued together on both pieces, it was time to put them together. I used contact cement again and, well, to save myself from having to say it every time, unless I say it otherwise, just assume that I used contact cement. Anyway, to glue the 2 layers together and also force the horizontal curve into it, I stuck them together along the center line and kept the back layer curled back on each side while I stuck the top layer down. When you do this, the top layer can no longer go back to the more straightened shape that it has, and it'll keep the curve of the back layer. This also creates overhang, so just use a razor knife to trim that down. Now that the base of the shield is done, I can do all the detail work. All of this is cut out of 5mm foam. To get the trim detail, I just cut it straight off of the pattern that I just used for the full shield. And just like the other layers, I glued it straight down to the shield base, as well as gluing the centers together. I should mention here that I stuck this layer down wrong on the top center of the left trim piece and tried taking it back off, but it was too late and it ripped. So mine has this big gash in it now that was just too hard to cover up. There's nothing I can do now, and I don't have the foam or the time to start over, so I'm just gonna get over it. So you will see that mistake throughout the build, just be more careful than I was. Also, remember to cut out all of the little inner details that go along the trim. All of the triangle squarish looking details are inset, and the circles are little domes, which I'll get into later, but for now just cut the circles out. And the last detail for the trim right now is a line that you need to score into both the left and right corners. Just follow what I do on screen. For the inner details, you don't have to do what I did. In fact, in the games, everything except the little silver S-shaped things are actually just painted on, but I cut everything out of 5mm foam and sanded bevels into all the edges. This was to give them more depth, but that's completely up to you. So for those little S-shaped things on either side of the Triforce, I wanted to try to use triangle dowels, but I realized that that just was not gonna happen. They all needed to be like almost 30mm wide or something, and I don't even think you can get them that thick. So what I did was tedious and annoying. I cut the shapes out of 10mm foam and used a razor knife to cut a bevel on both sides to make it into that little triangle shape all the way down it. Then I used the Dremel to sand it smoother. It's not the best looking work, but it's all I was able to do. I covered everything in a few coats of Plasti Dip spray, followed by gray primer. Then I hit the trim with silver. And when that dried, I masked the trim off and used 2 different shades of blue to try to get a gradient where it was lighter in the middle and darker as it got closer to the trim. I think it turned out pretty well for never having done this before. I started with the light blue covering the entire face, then dusted a darker blue around the edges until it looked right. For the handle, I used 1/2-inch PVC pipe and 2 90-degree connectors. I just cut it to fit my hand. And then the pieces that meet the foam are cut long enough to go a little ways into the foam, while still allowing my hand to grab the handle. I didn't glue the pipe together. It was such a tight fit that I couldn't get any of the pieces apart to glue them, so I said screw it and just left them as is. But you can use PVC cement or super glue to glue the pipe together if you want. I traced the pipe ends onto the foam, which marks where to use an X-Acto knife to cut into the foam so the pipe ends can go into it, and then I just super glued them in place. The strap was made exactly the same way I did the Raid Shield from Shield Hero not long ago. It's a piece of the same elastic sandwiched between the shield and a square of foam, all super glued to each other, leaving enough slack in the elastic to fit my arm through. I painted the inner detail pieces with acrylic paints, and this saved me from having to waste money on full cans of spray paint just for these little pieces. By the way, these were also sprayed with Plastidip and primer at the same time as the rest of the shield. The Triforce was painted yellow, and the bird was painted red. To glue them onto the shield, I used the pattern, which I kept mostly intact, and lined the center of the top of the Triforce and the top and bottom points of the bird head and body along the center line that you can still kind of see to line up where everything needed to go. And I used an X-Acto knife with a brand new blade so that it was as sharp as possible to score a ton of lines into the surface. This is the only way the super glue will stick down without the pieces peeling right back up later on. Then I just eyeballed the placement based on where all of the score marks were, and superglued all of the details in place. The last bit of detail are the little domes I mentioned earlier that go in the circle cutouts. I used 30mm DIY ornaments that split in half, and sanded the outside of them and spray painted them with the same silver that I used on the trim. Once they dried, I used them to press into the foam inside the circular cutout, and very lightly scored around the imprint, only cutting about 1 to 2mm deep. Then I used superglue inside the cuts and pressed the ornaments in place. And finally, I hit the whole shield with a satin clear coat. Alright, so that was how to make the Hylian Shield from The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. If you like this video, go ahead and give it that thumbs up, maybe subscribe for more, stay tuned for the Master Sword, and I'll see you guys later.